Hello everyone, this is Rob. I'm going to quickly walk you through some of today's lessons and show you what it's supposed to look like, and hopefully that will help you get your bearings. So let's start with installing VirtualBox and the lesson for the Ubuntu virtual machine. So if you haven't seen VirtualBox before, we're going to get the software from this link right here. And that will take you to VirtualBox's download page. And then from here, you'll select the operating system of your choice. This is a Windows computer, so I would go ahead and download the Windows software. And this is pretty straightforward. I already have VirtualBox installed on this machine, so I'm not going to do it. It's pretty much just follow the bouncing ball. If you have an SSD, I would recommend that you use that if you have the space, but it does take a considerable amount of space to store the disks for the virtual machine. So if space is a concern, then maybe you have a mechanical drive. So let's just imagine that I did that and we have VirtualBox installed on our machine. Alright, so the other thing it wants us to do is to go get an Ubuntu install disk. And that is right here. So let's head over there and grab the ISO for Ubuntu. And the most recent version of Ubuntu is 17.04, but they've put 16.04 up top. There's probably a good reason for that, and we're not going to question it too much. And we'll just go ahead and download 16.04. And we have to kind of walk through a few things here. I guess we urge you to contribute $15 and just find your way to what they want you to do. I guess they want us to wait. Or just get it. There you go. So this is going to be an ISO file here. And just save that somewhere where you can find it. (1604.2). Great. Alright. We're all set. Okay, so we've got our Ubuntu ISO and we've got VirtualBox installed. So we're done with this, and let's have a look at the next step. It wants us to create a virtual machine, and it wants us to give it at least 3 gigabytes of RAM, and it wants us to create a virtual disk. It wants it to be dynamically allocated, and there's some talk here about needing 30 gigabytes for the main net and at least 8 gigabytes if you want to synchronize with the test network. Now, if you haven't worked with virtual machines before, they're kind of neat. The idea is to create a software-based hardware platform, and then the guest operating system is installed on that virtual hardware. And what that means is that when you come to this course, you can bring Windows, Linux, Macs, hoop-de-doos. It doesn't really matter. When we install VirtualBox, it gives us a normalized platform, so we know that everybody is running on Ubuntu, and that just makes support and troubleshooting and describing the instructions a lot more manageable, because it helps us eliminate a lot of corner cases and OS specific idiosyncrasies. So let's just show what that is actually all about. So we'll go ahead and fire up VirtualBox, and then we'll say I want a new virtual computer. So let's call this B9 Student Training, and it's going to be Linux, and it's going to be Ubuntu 64-bit, and we'll go over here. Now this, of course, is entirely dependent on how much free memory your computer's actually got, because for performance reasons it's basically going to take that chunk of memory and give it to the virtual machine. And if that's not possible, and things like memory swapping have to assist, then the performance will suffer. But as long as you have enough memory, the performance here is surprisingly good if you haven't seen it before. We're also going to say it needs a new virtual disk. And then we will hit create. And the size of the virtual disk, I'm just going to go crazy and say 40 gigabytes. And you can leave all this stuff alone. The dynamically allocated just means that it won't eat up 40 gigabytes immediately, but it will eat up to 40 gigabytes as the space is consumed. And the operating system will think it's running in a 40 gigabyte file system. I'm just going to put it somewhere. I've got a mechanical drive E that should have plenty of space, so that's just fine. That's where I'm going to put it. And I'll go ahead and hit create. So now I have this machine, the B9 student training. Great. Now there is a little information over here about the virtual hardware, and one of these things is a IDE controller, which is an optical drive, and it's empty. And of course we want to install an operating system, and that means we have to insert the install media. And you might be wondering, how does the install media get installed on this computer? Well, that's where the ISO comes in. So we'll go over here to the storage and the empty drive, and hang on here. Where are we going? There we go. Choose an optical disk file. Okay, so we will go here and we find the ISO that we downloaded, and let's try this one. Now that's equivalent to inserting the disk. Now if we power the machine on, we should fire up and see that disk. And since there's no operating system on the empty 40 gigabyte drive, it's going to boot off the install media. So what's happening here is the exact same process that it would go through if you were installing this operating system on bare metal. This operating system is not special in any way. It's not made for VirtualBox. It's just a generic Ubuntu install disk, and it pretty much thinks it's installing on real hardware. And what's going to happen is it will run its built-in hardware detection processes, and it's going to detect things like the network adapter driver that it should use and that kind of stuff. In at the hardware device driver level, it might start detecting things like the VirtualBox display adapter or the VirtualBox network adapter, and from the perspective of this guest operating system, that's correct. Okay, so now we've got ourselves on the welcome panel, and we'll just go ahead and say we want to install Ubuntu. And there's a lot of question and answer stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and say install the updates while we do it. I'm going to skip the third-party graphics adapters and things like that. Just take your time. I'm going to say go ahead and erase the disk. That's the partitioning bit. We have a 40 gigabyte unpartitioned drive at this point. It's going to warn us about destroying data and that kind of thing, just in case we don't know what we're doing. We pick our time zone. Pick our keyboard layout. If you get into a little trouble here, it's just because of the initial screen resolution. Just go ahead and click that. Nope, we're not. Kind of nudge it forward here. There we go. Isn't that a neat trick? Display resolution is adjusting. That's kind of a neat trick that you can't get away with on physical. Alright, so we'll go like that. Pick a password. Type the password again. If you can. We're not protecting any state secrets here, so I think I'll just set it to log in automatically. That's going to be the root user. And now there's going to be a whole bunch of waiting for stuff, so I'm just going to pause until something interesting happens. Okay, that's what we want. So we'll go ahead and restart now. And it wants us to remove the installation media. So how does that work? Just go in here, into storage, make sure it's empty. There was an eject command from the OS, but they're not too sure if the mechanics of it work, so they asked us to check. We're okay. Press enter. We don't really need that anymore. By the way, just in case you're curious, this little status tray here shows you what's going on. This is a disk, and that means green means read and red means write. This is the network, so you can tell when there's data coming and going. This here is the optical. It shows you what's going on. So these are all just kind of status things that tell you what's happening with the virtual machine. Great. So this is what Ubuntu looks like when it fires up for the first time. It's a little bit busy at first, so if you haven't installed it on an SSD, just expect it to take a minute or two to settle down. Now I'm just going to do a little personalization here. There's all this stuff that I don't really plan to use. Okay, what's next? We're going to install the guest additions. These are like hardware drivers that go in the guest operating system to help it work with VirtualBox. It's going to enable a few features that we'll see in a moment. So it says go to the VirtualBox download page and click the link for your version, for instance 5.1.1.4, and get the additions. It'll be the VirtualBox guest additions. And let's see what's going on here. So in my case, just to show you that there's some flexibility here, I'm using 5.1.8 and it's working just fine for me. So what we're going to do, actually on second thought, I think that's a mistake. We're going to go outside the guest operating system and head to the VirtualBox download page and find the add-ons for 5.1 5.8. So what's going on here? There we go. The guest editions for 5.1.8. Let's go ahead and download that and put it somewhere where we can find it. There we go. Alright, so we've got VirtualBox Editions, and how are we going to install that? We'll come back over here, go into the machine, find the optical drive, and choose a file. And then we'll go to the place where we put it and insert it. Okay, so that's the same as installing the disk in the optical tray, and the operating system reacts by asking us if we would like to install it. So let's go ahead and do that. Then it will ask for the root password, and if all goes well, it should just install those additions. Okay, great. So the additions are installed, and it's suggesting that we might have to restart the computer. So let's go ahead and do that just to be on the safe side. Alright, we're ready for the next step. Okay, so if you thought that the reboot was a good time for a leg stretch, you'll notice that Ubuntu screensaver kicked in, and just for the heck of it, where do they hide that? Yeah, there we go, finally. Okay, brightness and lock. Just a little personalization here. Basically going to say don't do that. Okay, great. Now that we have the add-ins installed, we can do a little trick with the clipboard. And the way this works is we'll just go to the shared clipboard and say that we want bidirectional. So what that's doing for us is just saying that if we come into this Ubuntu machine and copy something to the clipboard, then we'll be able to go back to Windows and paste, or in reverse. Okay, so what's the next step? Create a shared folder. In the host computer's home folder, create a folder named dapps, and in the guest VM, create a folder named dapps2. It should look like this on your guest VM. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And let's see here. We'll fire this up, and we will create a new folder. Call it dapps. And there it is. So I went out to Windows and it created a folder called dapps on my drive E. You put it anywhere that you like. Okay, and in the guest machine, we also create a folder named dapps. Great. Now what? Open your VM's VirtualBox settings and navigate to shared folders. And we'll click the drop down to navigate to the dApps folder, which should look like this in your home computer. Then type dApps. You should see something like shared folders, dApps. Click OK, and then mount it. Alright, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Go back to the top here. We want to open your VM's VirtualBox settings and navigate to shared folders and find it. Okay. So we'll go to settings, go to shared folders. So let's do that. Okay. Make permanent. See how it likes that. All right. Great. Then what? We have to type in this command inside the guest. So we'll go into the guest and find the terminal. And I like to lock that to the taskbar because we're going to be using it a lot. Then go ahead and type in the command. And there you go. If that is working right, you should be able to do that. And then head out to the host operating system, and there it is. So you can see that the guest operating system and the host are sharing a folder out there. Okay, what's next? Forwarding ports. Now the idea here is that the Ubuntu machine is kind of nice to have Ethereum running, and that's great, but you're used to your favorite operating system and your favorite editors and just your familiar environment. And so what we're going to do is treat this Ubuntu computer as a remote. And this is a matter of personal taste and how you like to work. But what we're going to do is we're just going to do a little networking here so that we can talk to this Ubuntu computer remotely. So to do that, we'll go into the VM's network adapters and play with port forwarding. So let's see if we can find our way there. We'll go to the VM settings and navigate to network on adapter 1 and click advanced. Okay, great. So let's go over to settings and network and click on advanced. All right. Now, why does it not want to give us port forwarding? That's not it. I think we'll go to NAT. There you go. So network address translation. And then we'll go to port forwarding and add one. And the first rule is going to be geth, and is going to be $8545. I'm just going to compare here. Right, and guest port also 8545. Great. And what's the other one? 8000 for the web server. Okay. Great. Now it says we're going to start netcat listen on all IP addresses on port 8000. Okay, so if this doesn't seem especially clear, what we're doing is just starting a software process inside the guest to listen on one of these ports, and then we're going to just make sure that network traffic is being routed appropriately so that this computer is actually answering. So this is kind of like a ping test, except it's listening on port 8000, and we'll just confirm that traffic is flowing the way that we need it to. So we'll go ahead and start that. And then just to give you a little idea here, when you do telnet localhost 8000 on a Windows machine, you'll find that telnet is not actually installed. So we have to kind of extrapolate off of that and think about our own environment. My favorite terminal editor is something called Xterm. And I'm just going to go ahead and start that. And it gives me a more Linux-like shell. And that's going to let us do telnet localhost 8000. So localhost, of course, is the host computer. And we told it to take all the traffic on port 8000 and forward it to the Ubuntu guest. So what we're hoping is the Ubuntu guest is going to actually answer. Let's see what happens. It says it's connected to localhost, so that's a good sign. And then we can go something like that. And sure enough, we can see that the Ubuntu computer is actually paying attention, so traffic is doing what we want. We can do the same thing on port 8545. When it says the escape character is this, what they mean is control square bracket, and you get the telnet prompt, and that kind of breaks the connection. And then we'll say quit, and look at that. You can go up here, say 85, turn the numlock off, and say 8545, like that. Go to our terminal, 8545. Yep, we're good. Control square bracket, quit. Great. Congratulations, you've got your Ubuntu virtual machine set up, and you can talk to it from outside, and you have a shared folder on your favorite operating system where you can edit programs and they will be presented inside the Ubuntu guest. So you're all set, and that concludes this section on setting up the Ubuntu environment.